Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning still. I have some unfortunate news. My name is Bongani, and I'm a lecturer in the history department at the University of the Western Cape. And I was invited to be in conversation with Hlumelo Biko about this wonderful book, Black Consciousness, A Love Story. But for whatever reason, it appears as if our speaker is no show. And so that leaves us in quite a predicament. So sincere apologies to everybody who's made it out here for this conversation. But what I can do for maybe perhaps 5 minutes is I'd like to read a few passages from the book, just explain its importance, and then perhaps we can just leave it there. And sincere apologies again to everyone who came. So, is that okay? Okay, sure. So I'm going to read four paragraphs, because I found this book really moving, and perhaps this will get to the reason why. So at the time that Steve Biko was in custody, at the time of his death, Dr. Mampela Rampele, his partner, was in labor, or she was having complications with Hlumelo Biko. She was in a hospital in what was then Limpopo. So he writes about that. He writes in this one chapter, he says, "I was born under truly strange circumstances. In fact, I almost died on the same day as my father." So I'm just going to read the 4 passages from this particular chapter, and then I'll speak a little about the book, and then we can leave it there. So at the exact time my father was dying in the back of a police vehicle, my mother and I were fighting for our lives in another vehicle en route to Pietersburg Provincial Hospital. To make these coincidences even stranger, Uncle Bani Pityana, was also in detention at the time, told me that on the night of 11 September, he dreamt that my father was asking him to take care of his children. He remembers asking my father, "What makes you think your children will need to be taken care of?" As often happens in dreams, the question was left unanswered. He woke up with a sense of foreboding that something bad was about to happen to his friend. On the morning of 12 September, my mother received a phone call. Given a doctor's strict order for bed rest, the nursing sister in charge had some trouble in convincing her to take the call in the staff room. When she picked up the phone, Tenjue Mtinso was on the line. Tenjue broke the news to her that the man whose child she was expecting, whom she was about to marry, had been killed. My mother returned to her bed in shock. Very little of what she was told made sense, and the rest of the day was a blur. And I'll just read one final line. When she woke up the next day, the morning newspapers carried the story of my father's death as the headline story. When she recalled that day 42 years later, she told me that the phone call temporarily gave her the strength to keep her baby and fight even harder to get well. All she could think about was not losing her last remaining connection to my father. I think that's a really moving passage. And I think part of the book, what really struck me about the book is so much about Steve Biko's life, Dr. Mampela Rampele's life is in the public domain. But Hlumelo takes us backstage, tells these intimate stories of their love story, which was also very complicated. As you can tell from the passage that I'd read, also filled with tragedy, filled with joy, filled with also, I think these were young people. I think they would have, Mampela Rampele to me is somebody who I've always imagined as being older. But in these books, these are young people. These are students who are reading together, who are trying to imagine a better world. And it's a love story in that sense. And I think one of the greatest contribution that he makes, Hlumelo Biko, in this book is about when he talks about Black consciousness, defined Black in a very broad category, Black as encompassing all of the people who were oppressed. And he asks in the last chapter of the book, or in the penultimate last chapter of the book, what has happened to that definition of Black? How come it has narrowed? How come we speak of Black, colored, Indian, white, Vivut's categories of people is something that it still retains its power over our tongues? Can we imagine a different future, a different way of speaking to each other? So I'm very sad that the conversation today has not been able to take place. But I deeply want to thank everyone and the organizers as well, and wish everyone well on their journeys. Thank you.